Tell us how this all started, Bob. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles, the west side of Los Angeles. So I grew up going to the beach and enjoying Southern California.
As a self-confessed dive junkie, I'm curious, what inspired you to get a medical degree?
So I thought you wanted short answers, so we need to not ask that question. No,
Okay.
Actually, it's really quite fascinating because I am a diver first. Becoming a doctor was just because it was the highest level of diving certification I could find at the time. I had become a dive instructor. I had been working at a hyperbaric chamber. I hit so many glass ceilings that it was time to just throw in the towel and go to medical school.
I saw the picture of you and Christine when you were on the dive boat. It looks like you were both in dry suits at the time.
So I met Christine scuba diving. I was teaching an advanced scuba class in West Los Angeles, the Pacific School of Scuba. She had just come back from San Diego, where she was in college, and moving back to LA, where she was starting a new job with LAPD in the crime lab. And she wanted to take an advanced scuba class herself. And of all the gin joints in all of Los Angeles, she lived in Glendale, she passed many, and chose Pacific School of Scuba. All of the students that I was working with wanted to continue the advanced dry suit class that we were in. So we continued that outside of this dive shop and continued to be very good friends. We got to the point where friendship wasn't enough, and the rest is history. Our whole life we've shared diving together. For our 20th anniversary, we dove every wreck we could find from Key Largo to Key West. For our 50th birthdays, we went and slung doubles and dove the caverns at Vortex Springs. And this summer, we'll be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, hopefully somewhere diving.
We spent time earlier talking about your NASA assignment to Star City, Russia in support of our space program. It's something we would all be interested to hear more about.
NASA has had a presence in Russia for many years. Since the cessation of the space shuttle, we have utilized the Russian launch vehicle, the Soyuz rocket, to deliver astronauts from Earth to the space station. We send our astronauts to Moscow and Star City, a small town 45 minutes outside of Moscow, to train on the Russian portion of the space station, as well as the Russian launch vehicles. As long as we have our astronauts in dangerous situations or potentially hazardous situations, we will have our physicians monitoring them to make sure they're safe. I have worked as the town doc in Star City, Russia, 2 times now for NASA, and I will be going back again this summer, but this time to Moscow to serve our portion of the NASA population in Moscow.
In my experience, people that love to dive also have fascinating lives of adventure. You've been to Nepal and experienced seeing and wondering at the roof of the world.
I was over in Nepal for a month during my time in medical school on a humanitarian project. We were volunteering at clinics in Nepal to help treat the Nepali people. So we were supposed to go on a trek at the end of my time in Nepal, which would have given me time to acclimatize to the altitude in Nepal, which is closer to Denver. Unfortunately, the Maoist revolution and the Maoist revolt at the time made the Annapurna Range unsafe. So in order to go on a trek, I needed to go earlier in my trip and had the opportunity to go to Everest Base Camp. When they offered that, of course, I said yes. Unfortunately, I had an underlying pulmonary illness. I had just an upper respiratory infection when I got to Nepal. And taking that to altitude, I ended up having a case of high altitude pulmonary edema. Coughing, my lungs got filled with fluid, my own fluid, and I almost died. In fact, they put me in the room with all the porters in case I did die rather than having me in the room with our own people. It was serious enough. We called a helicopter to evac me out. By the time they had cleared my Dan insurance, and I highly recommend Dan insurance because it would have paid for this, it was too late to launch. Because the mountains are higher than a helicopter can fly, they have to fly by line of sight. So they had to wait till the next morning to launch. Fortunately, that night, my body started to acclimatize, and overnight I peed out 6 liters of fluid. Next morning, I woke up feeling much better. We discussed it as a group, agreed to let me stay on the trek. We had an acclimatization day that day, and I was just able to get better and better each day. So I made it to Everest Base Camp at 17.6 and even the peak of Kalapatar at 18.5. Had a great trek and then came back safely.
It's probably that point where we should talk about your work at NASA and the Neutral Buoyancy Lab.
I oversee a staff of 10 hyperbaric technicians and aerospace physiology technicians, where we oversee any time we put a human into an alternobaric environment. I do research support, so here I am as a research subject, and this is my own research that I've done looking at fluid shifts in humans, trying to understand immersion pulmonary edema better, both as the lead researcher but also as a subject. And in this picture, this is me again as a subject in a hypobaric chamber where I was looking at medical interventions to improve performance when hypoxic.
This was extracted from a film featuring Dr. Sanders. It applies to all divers.
In the May-June 2018 issue of Underwater magazine, Dr. Robert Sanders co-authored an article entitled ADCI Medical Changes in Review, Don't Fear the Framingham. Dr. Sanders was gracious enough to host ADCI TV at NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab near Houston, Texas, to discuss the inclusion of the Framingham Risk Score as part of the medical screening of divers.
I man a team of 10 personnel, so we have myself and 10 hyperbaric technicians and aerospace physiology technicians that staff a hyperbaric chamber here 24/7, 365.
Heart disease is the leading killer of Americans each year. The same trend is true in divers. This may be due to the intense physical demands of diving, which can unmask underlying heart disease. These guidelines recommend that beginning at age 35, all divers undergo an assessment of their risk for developing heart disease using the Framingham Risk Score. The changes to the ADCI guidelines are geared toward keeping our divers safe as they enter the water. Using the FRS and the findings of the NBL, we are better able to identify and mitigate potential risk.
If we can reduce the risk of cardiovascular events such as heart attack or sudden cardiac arrest, then we can extend a diver's career and improve their health.
This is all great, but the true measure of a man is his willingness to get down and dirty with family and friends.